Hi, today, as you know, we are going to discuss very important React question which is usually asked in interviews, and it is the life cycle methods. What do we mean by life cycle method? It is the cycle of a life of a component when we say it in the React terms. Well, let's just forget React, let's just forget component and everything. What is the cycle of life? In general, in humans, in any other species, right? So what happens to a life? It's born, right? It's born, then it grows. It grows from child to teen to adult, growing old. And then every time, even if you're growing old, you're still growing yourself, making yourself into something else, learning something new. And you're growing, you're updating yourself. That entire state is updating, where you're alive and you're growing, right? And then finally you die. I'm sorry if that sounds depressing, but that's a reality. So you die. So that in itself is the cycle of life, right? So you're born, you grow yourself, and then finally you die. And that's is the same for the React and for the components as well. So the when your component is born, what do we mean by that? When your component is mounted, the mounting, meaning that it is getting inserted in the DOM. You can see something on the screen, your template, your HTML is visible on the screen, it is mounted, right? It is in the mounting state, getting a birth, right? Then it's updating. Second point is updating when anything is happening with your component. For example, some state changed, some new props has been sent to your component, right? So it is going to update itself based on the state change, based on the props change, or even if someone just forced update the entire component, right? So that is also where it is going to update. It is going to re-render everything, all of its content, right? So that is its growth. It is growing, it is changing, it's growing and changing, growing and changing. Everything comes in aspect of updating of this component. And finally, when everything is done, it is going to die, right? Now it's time to unmount it from the DOM, and it will be removed from the DOM and it will be gone. Now, since we understand mounting, updating, unmounting, so now what do we mean by lifecycle methods? It is when there is a certain life cycle of a component, right? Probably it is in its mounting stage, probably it is in its updating stage, or it is about to get removed from the DOM, right? It could be at any stage this component could be in. So if we want to do something particular at some particular point, that's where the power of these methods come. So for example, these three methods that we can see and we mostly know and we mostly use, I would say, is component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount. The first, then the render, it is a lifecycle method where actually this render method, what is it doing? It is rendering your your component, the contents of your component, the HTML to the DOM. This is the hero, basically, the first thing that happens, right? Now, once your component is inserted into the DOM and the React is updating the DOM, everything that you want to render on the DOM is getting rendered, and it's rendered. Now you want something to happen. Once your content is in the DOM, now you want something to happen. That's when you can use this method, which is component did mount. Same goes with update, right? Some state changed, some props changed, and the render method ran again. It inserted your updated content in the DOM once again. Now you want to change or you want to do something once it is updated, right? So component did update comes in handy at that point in time. Once your component updated, then you want to perform some action, go with component did update. And this component will unmount as again, it is your component is like done with the life, don't want to live anymore and want to die. So you want to do that here, so you can use this method. Component will unmount. So you want to perform something before that component completely dies and is removed from the DOM, right? So enough of the theory. Let's see how it behaves in the browser actually. I have created some boilerplate code. I'm just going to explain it so that we can save some time here and there. So the lifecycle methods that we are going to discuss, we are going to use it in the class-based components only. Yeah, I know we don't highly recommend using class-based components, but to understand the real power of these lifecycle methods, that can be used as hooks in functional components. For example, component did mount, component did update, component will unmount. Both of these, three of them can be used as use effect hook in functional component. That is for some other video. If you really want to know about that, we can go in details and you can let me know in the comments if you really want to understand that, and we can dig deeper. But let's just focus on this one. This is basically a class component, your app.js. It has a constructor taking a prop, initializing a state, and we have a counter, very typical example, and a method which is incrementing the counter. And in our template, we have nothing but a counter which is displaying its current state, and a button which is going to increment the counter. It is going to call this method, and this method is going to set it to plus plus, which is counter, whatever it is, plus 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 1. Simple. It again, we are not using any methods here, but still it has two methods, right? It has constructor and it has render. So render in itself, as we have already discussed, render meaning that your content, whatever it is, the HTML, is now about to get inserted in the DOM. So if you want to set some states, set some data before something happens, or before your content is inserted in the DOM, before even that point, and there is nothing on the screen, there is nothing on the DOM, it is about to happen. So you want to do something, if you want to set some variables here and there, right? So constructor is the place where you would do that. So when a component is about to get born, the very first thing that is going to run is your constructor, even before render, right? So constructor is a place where you are going to initialize all your states or like your variables or anything that you want to initialize even before something is in there in the DOM, right? So this dot state is perfect example. If you want to set the initialized state here, the constructor is the perfect point to do that. Second thing, now what happens next is render, right? So render is going to render everything that you have written here, right? It's going to render it in your DOM. It's going to get inserted inside the DOM. So now let's check this. I have this basically 0 and increment counter, and we can see on the, let me just zoom in a little bit. I hope it's better visible now. So we are going to see what exactly happens when a component is born. So we have a constructor. Let's add a breakpoint here, and we have a render. Let's add a breakpoint here. So we will see what exactly happens. So I'm going to run this, and we are going to see, and with this, we are also going to see how we can particularly use breakpoints, because I have been asked time and again to show how to debug things and how to use the breakpoints and what are the tips and tricks that we can use. So using breakpoints is a very good way to debug how things are happening in the browser, what is causing the blocks or issues or whatever. So if I run it, let's see what happens. So yeah, so it is going to go in the constructor, which is going to run the first thing even before render. So anything that you want to set, there's nothing on the screen as you can see here because nothing is rendered yet. We can also see what is in the DOM. There is nothing in the DOM. DOM is completely empty, right? So this is where you are setting your state and any other thing that you want to set specifically before anything renders into the DOM, right? And then the next thing is, you can see now it is in the render. It is in the render, but nothing is on the screen. Why? Because we have not actually completed this thing. Now you can see your component is successfully born. Congratulations. And now, once it is born, now we want to do something. For example, now you have your data, you have everything on the HTML, you have your buttons, you have everything. Maybe you want to click something, or maybe you want to fetch something from backend or your server, right? So this is the perfect place. The component did mount is the perfect thing where you can do, because now everything is on the screen, and it's a perfect place to fetch data, for data fetching. So we are not going to do that particularly, but we are going to see, okay, sorry, not that one. Component did mount. And I'm just going to write component is born. So your component is born, right? And let me also check component did update as well. Console.log component is growing old, slowly aging, gracefully aging. But yeah, slowly and steadily reaching there, yeah. So now we have constructor. That's first thing that's going to run. Then your render, and we'll have this one here. One breakpoint on the mount and one breakpoint on component did update, right? So we are now going to check. We are very sure the first thing that is going to run is constructor. The second thing that is going to run is your render, and render is going to render everything on your DOM. And finally, once everything is on the DOM and it is inserted, and you have your template, your HTML perfectly there, it's perfect time now to see what happens next, right? So let's just actually put something on render as well. If I run it, oh my god, let me rerun it. Yeah. So again, it is here on render. Nothing is on the screen. Cool. We want to get data on screen. It is on screen, as we can see, because everything is now rendered. And now you can see now it is on console component did mount, which is if you want to do something after your things are updated and your DOM is updated, it's on the screen, your elements are on the screen. Now you want to do something, yeah, here is the place. Okay, because after that this runs, and the next thing, we are done, right? So component is successfully born. Now next thing is I am trying to update my component. So what happens then? When I update my component, like when I'm clicking on this increment counter, it has updated the state. So something has changed on the component. It is going to re-render. As we can see in this method, you have this dot set state. So we have done the this dot set state somewhere in the increment counter. As you can see, I've clicked this increment counter. It has initiated the set state. And anytime when there is set state or new props or force update, it is going to call the render again. So it is calling our render again, right? And after that, it is going, everything is now inserted, and you can also see that data is updated there. The counter has been incremented, right? So once that happens, now you can do something in component did update. Your component is successfully updated. So now you can probably just console log, because now it is here, right? So you can console log component is growing old slowly, right? And if you go here, you can see component is growing old slowly. So that's how you can see the component did update can work. Okay, so the next thing that I want to discuss is component will unmount. Now you lived a very great life, maybe miserable, maybe very great, but now it's time to die, and it's time to grant your last wish. So what method you are going to use? Component will unmount. So you're going to die and you have one time to grant your last wish. This is the method where you're going to write it down. Component will unmount. Let's see how it behaves. So I have created this another very cool component, a lifecycle methods. I have given it the name. I don't know why, but I've given it like this name. It has a state, it has an email, a counter on its own. And then you have component will unmount. This method I've written down, and it's not doing anything but just printing its counter state and a simple H1 with lifecycle methods. So if I go here, I'm not using it. Okay, sorry, I'm not using it till yet. So lifecycle methods, and I can see now this lifecycle methods, and it has a counter from lifecycle methods component, and this counter is from our main app.js component. Yeah, I have this this one, and I'm already adding this. So let's just add a breakpoint here. Breakpoint here, that's fine. So this is app.js, and it is rendering its content, and fine, we're cool. Now I want to unmount it. and I just want to remove it, right? So I want to remove it. I don't want to use lifecycle methods anymore. So if I go ahead and I remove it and I save it and I go back, you can see here. You can see it automatically came to the lifecycle methods and to component will unmount and its log. And now it's going to say the lifecycle method will be removed from DOM. You're going to die, unfortunately. And you can see lifecycle method is removed from the DOM, and finally your component is born, because that's once the entire render is complete, then the component did mount will be called. Make sense? Okay, cool. I think these are three major component lifecycle methods that you should be aware of. The three stages, how we go about these stages: mounting, updating, unmounting. What do we mean by mounting, updating, unmounting? What are the methods component did mount you're going to use for mostly data fetching? Component did update. Anytime your component is updated, you want to do something particularly, use this method. And if you want to grant your last wish, use component will unmount, right? So that's it. But there are some other methods which are not used very oftenly, but we will discuss them. And I'm just going to click over here. It says we have this method, get derived state from props, and we have this should component update. Should component update. Anytime your props changes or your component is in the updating state, you want to figure out whether you want to re-render everything on this component or you don't want to re-render. So you can return anything from this component, from this method, based on if you think that re-rendering could be meaningful or not. If it can provide you some performance optimization from not re-rendering this component, if yes, you can say, okay, I don't think there is any meaning on updating this component, and then I would choose to not update it. So let's say I have this app.js, for example, should component update, and I say by default it is going to return true. It's always going to update. So I want to say I don't want to update. So what happens? What happens when I click over here? Nothing happens. Your component is not updating. It's not updating. It's not updating. It's not updating. Now let me return true, which we were already doing. Now everything is happening perfectly, and your component is updated. But let's just see something else. It is going to make more sense. So I'm just going to use a conditional rendering. For example, I'm just going to say this dot state dot counter. If its value is 2, then I would like to update it. Otherwise, I don't like to update it. So you can use it based on some conditional rendering as well. So let's just see what happens. So if it is 0, it did not update. It did not update. It updated, right? Why? Because the counter was this, but it did not update anything, right? The counter was changing for sure, right? For sure it was changing, but it was not updating anything. If we want to check it here, what exactly happens? Let's just see. Yeah. So first time, everything is going to happen good. Now I'm going to update it. There is no render method called. There is no render method called, but increment counter is called for sure. We can also check this for sure. So this is the initial state, and now I'm doing things. So increment counter is calling itself and it is updating the counter, but we are saying that no, I don't want the component to update. We can also see what happens here. Let's just refresh it once again. So this is the initial state. Yeah. Anytime I increment my counter, it is going to increment the counter, the state is going to happen for sure. What happens next? It's going to come on should component update. As we know, before render, it's going to come on should component update. That's exactly what it is doing. And it is saying, okay, no, counter is still 1. And no thanks, there is no going to be render, right? But the state has been updated for sure. Now it is 1. The counter is 1. And you can also add a watcher here. So this is a watch. So these are all the debugging tips and tricks that I'm sharing. This is how you actually do it. So you are adding that. So you can see that it is 1, but it is not updated, right? Why? Because should component update returned false. That's fine. Now it is here, and still your state is 1, and it's not going to fulfill the condition, and it's still going to return false. We'll click this once again. Now your this.state.counter is 2. Cool. You are in here. You're updating. The state has been changed to 3 now. What next? Should component update? The counter is 2. Is it true? Yes, it is. And then it is going to call render. Once it is going to call render, it is going to re-render everything, insert it in the DOM, and then you will see the updated value in the DOM. Make sense? It absolutely makes sense to me, to be honest. But that doesn't matter. It should make sense to you. So if it doesn't make sense to you, please leave a comment down below. We can discuss it. And don't forget to join the open sessions. Now let's move on to the next one. The get derived state from props. It is a static method. So I'm not going to explain why is it static, why only this method is static. You need to go do your homework, get to know about why this method is static. Basically, it also is self-explanatory that you are going to derive the state from props. What could be the use case? On your anytime your prop is changed, for example, for that particular component, you want to do something with the state. Maybe you want to reset your state. Maybe you want to perform some particular action on that state. This is where you do it, right? So you cannot directly use this dot state or this dot set state. You have to return an object. Actually, is your state, your updated state, right? And we are going to use this method, get derive. I'm not sure why it's not suggesting me, but it's fine. Get derive the states from props. It is going to take your previous state and the updated props. So what are the next props that you're going to get? And what was the previous state? So it is going to take your next props and your previous state, and you can basically just compare something or just return some new state, or you just want to derive something from the props. So let's say it has a counter, and this is a lifecycle method, and it is sending the counter, this counter as a prop. Okay, so this app.js is sending its own counter as a prop to the lifecycle methods.js, right? So next props is going to be the counter, whatever updated counter we are getting from the app.js, and previous state is the previous state of this. So we want to do what? We just want to return maybe something, let's say counter, this is your state, and what you want to do, you want to set it next props, which is the latest props that you're getting, dot counter, right? So you got the counter, whichever you got, and you want to derive something, you want to change something. And for me, for example, let's say I just want to always multiply it with 3. So if you're getting counter 0 from here, 0 into 3, 0. If you get 1 from here, you get 1 into 3, 3. So it's always 3 times of what you are getting from app.js. If that is your use case, then you can always use this method that you can, derive the state from your props. That's what it basically means, right? Okay, let's see how it behaves now. So we have only one breakpoint now on get derived state from props, and I am going to run it. Perfect. It is here. There's nothing on the screen. Why there's nothing on the screen? Because this happens way before render. Yeah. You want to get something, you want to update something. It's like a constructor kind of thing that you're trying to do before rendering. You want to get the state from the props. Yeah. Before we do that, let's just see what is the next prop and what is our previous state. Sorry, previous state. So this is counter 0. This is counter 0 because we are still on the initialized state. Yeah, our component is still getting born. And we are here. Now I'm going to update it. So as we can clearly see, we are on this method and we have next props, which is 1, like the updated prop. And we have a previous state, which is counter 0 and an email as well. Yeah. So now we are going to reset our state, which is the counter, which is next prop, which is 1. 1 into 3. 3. Congratulations. 1 into 3 is 3. And you can see this is 1, but this is 3. Again, next time, we are going to call it now. Counter is 2. Previous state, it is 3. It is going to get 2. 2 into 3 is going to be 6. So 2 into 6. So anytime your app.js is incrementing your counter by 1, you want your lifecycle method component to update its counters 3 times. That's a use case. So every time your prop is changing, you want your state to update 3 times. You want to derive your state from the props. That's what the method means basically, right? So every time you're going to change it, every time is going to update it 3 times, 3 times, 3 times. That's it. That's it for this video, actually, guys. So, I have basically covered all of these methods that we needed to cover. There's just one left, which is get snapshot before update. That's your homework kind of thing. I want you to basically just dig deeper into why we use this, how can we use this. It is if the very typical case of using get snapshot before update is if you want to retain your scroll positions. For example, you are on some Facebook post or an Instagram post, and you and the user is scrolling to a particular comment, and at that particular comment something is updated, like let's say the user edited the comment, right? That is at a particular scroll position. Now before your component get updated, you want to retain that scroll position, that position where the user was previously, so that it doesn't have to go to the top of the page and then will have to re-scroll again and again and again, right? So if you want to get a snapshot of your client height, client width, the scroll position on the x-axis, on the y-axis, and you want to retain that data before Reacts actually update the DOM, you want to get a snapshot of that. So once you have the snapshot of that and your component is updated, now you can use this method, very famous one, the component did update. And here you can use this method, and using this method, inside this, you can reset all of that client heights or the scroll position which you have taken snapshot in this method. That's a very typical case, but I really want you to dig deeper into what we can actually bring it up and also test your debugging skills. And I hope this video is clear and it makes sense to you guys. I've tried to put in everything that I knew and the best way we can understand it. If you have any questions, concerns, do let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thank you, and take care of yourself.